The ancient lands of Mesopotamia. Here we step into that fertile crescent where human history and civilization began. Close your eyes and travel back thousands of years. In front of us are fertile lands with rivers flowing through them, towering temples on the hills, and cities that hold legends in every stone. Now we're going to explore the first great rulers of these lands, their magnificent reigns, and their empires together. Here, a tale awaits us that stretches from the city-states of the Sumerians to the grand ambitions of Akkad and the glorious kings of Babylon. This is not just a history lesson, it's the story of bloody wars, brave leaders, magnificent cities, and the first laws ever written for humanity. We'll embark on a journey through the history of these lands, shaped by power, ambition, and faith. Together, we will uncover the secrets behind each event and the reasons behind every victory and downfall, tracing the footsteps of history along the dusty roads of Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia. Just saying the name echoes the deep history we have. This is the fertile land stretching between the banks of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, where life burst forth with such energy. Here, humanity learned to settle down and put down roots, moving away from the tough days when survival depended solely on hunting and wandering. This region is so rich that ancient peoples named it the Fertile Crescent. And that name truly reflects the abundant spirit of Mesopotamia. The silt carried by the rivers transformed into a source of life when combined with water. For this reason, the first seeds of agriculture were sown here, and it became the place where people learned how to cultivate the land and benefit from its bounty. Centuries ago, people living under the most primitive conditions of nature gradually unraveled the secrets of this land. Think about it, the first farming techniques were born right here. People discovered the life-giving power of the water flowing from the Tigris and Euphrates, and they developed irrigation systems that could even green up arid land by channeling the water. This way, living conditions that once depended solely on the whims of nature began to fall under human control. The first canals and ditches dug in these lands were among humanity's earliest victories over nature. Thanks to these irrigation systems, the land continuously yielded abundant crops, allowing communities to form close-knit settlements to reap the benefits of agriculture. Now there were villages being established here, and those villages eventually grew into towns, which then turned into magnificent cities. In the plazas of these cities, people gathered, markets formed for the goods like wheat, barley, and lentils that came from the cultivated fields, and the civilization rising from this land slowly began to reveal itself. These cities, built around the water sources brought by the Tigris and Euphrates, became not only living spaces but also centers where great dreams emerged, massive temples were erected, and the first forms of governance took shape. The first city-states that arose here had structures powerful enough to support not just families but thousands of people living together. Those early cities became symbols of Mesopotamia and were among the first cradles of civilization in world history. This land would witness the first steps of the greatest empires of ancient history. The first temples would be built here, and altars dedicated to the gods would become sacred places where people met their deities. Mesopotamia was a starting point like no other. It marked the end of nomadic life and the birth of settled societies, the first agriculture, the first cities, and the grand adventure we call civilization. Imagine those first cities, names like Ur, Uruk, and Eridu, beginning to shine like beacons in this fertile land. These cities were the very heart of Mesopotamia, the first settlements where the seeds of civilization were sown. Each one had its own gods, rulers, and people, intricately connected yet independent. In these city-states, society was tightly knit. Every citizen knew their duties and found peace under the watchful eyes of the gods and their rulers. The deities were the guardians and guides of these cities, with each city reflecting its own spirit and named after its own god. Uruk was under the protection of the god Enki. Ur was watched over by the moon god Nana, and Eridu was a sacred land ruled by the god of wisdom Enlil. In these cities, daily life revolved around trade, agriculture, and artistic creation. Blessed by the Tigris and Euphrates, these cities didn't just rely on farming but also welcomed traders from far-off lands. The trade routes that stretched beyond Mesopotamia formed the foundation of Sumerian wealth. Merchants brought copper and silver from the northern mountains and obtained precious stones and wooden goods from distant eastern lands. At the center of this commerce were the bustling market squares found in the heart of the cities. The sounds of hammers echoing in every corner, skilled artisans crafting jewelry from stones, and the care with which women wove fabric. That's how the pulse of Sumerian society beat. But perhaps their most significant legacy was the birth of writing. Yes, it was the Sumerians who took the first steps toward writing in human history. That early writing system known as cuneiform became a tool for passing down knowledge from generation to generation to generation. The marks inscribed on clay tablets with wooden sticks were initially used for keeping trade records. Over time, prayers dedicated to the gods, accounts of kings' achievements, and the people's quest for justice were also etched onto these clay tablets. Cuneiform was not just a record-keeping tool that reflected the thoughts, hopes, and fears of Sumerian society. Now picture the magnificent temples of these ancient cities, the massive structures known as ziggurats, which served as homes for the gods on earth and places for the people to connect with them. These temples, with their staircases reaching toward the heavens, were sacred symbols of the Sumerians' devotion to their deities. Around the ziggurats, the people would offer sacrifices, gather during festival days, and hold grand celebrations. Here, prayers were offered to protect against the gods' wrath and to gain their love, and sacrifices were made. These temples were the center of life for the Sumerians, representing both the city and the spirit of the people living in the shadow of the gods. And so the Sumerians established the first great civilization of Mesopotamia with their writing, their gods, and their magnificent cities. The rise of city-states like Uruk, and Eridu became one of the starting points not only for Mesopotamia but for all of human history. As the Sumerians took their first steps illuminating the path of human history, they created a writing system, a social structure, and a belief system that would pass down this great legacy to the future. The cities that rose on the stones of Mesopotamia laid the foundations of knowledge and civilization. The echoes of those first cities still resonate in our ears. Of course, we're about to take our viewers deep into Mesopotamia, to a time woven with legends. We're diving into the ancient streets of the holy city of Uruk, where even the wind seems to whisper. Get ready to meet a legendary leader like no other, a hero whose name has echoed for centuries, King Gilgamesh. This was no ordinary king. He was a demigod and a hero who transcended his era with every trait: power, ambition, courage, you name it. His life and struggles shone like the stars above, guiding the people of Mesopotamia for ages. The city of Uruk was the sacred place where Gilgamesh established both his throne and his legacy. According to one tale, he built the massive stone walls of Uruk with his own hands. They were so sturdy that no storm or attack dared to bring them down. These stones were not just physical protection for Uruk, they symbolized the safety from fears that lived in the hearts of its people. Gilgamesh promised peace and security to his citizens as the guardian of Uruk. Dear friends, in that time these city walls were known as the strongest structures in Mesopotamia, admired even in neighboring cities. Gilgamesh was both the son of the gods and a hero to his people. But Gilgamesh's story wasn't just about those mighty structures. His name was the embodiment of a heroic epic that resonated in the heart of Uruk. As a demigod, Gilgamesh stood out from other mortals with his powers and ambition, frequently challenging the gods and pushing his limits. As a result of this defiance, the gods sent him Enkidu, the only being created from clay in the wild who could stand up to him. Enkidu became his closest friend, his loyal companion, and also his fiercest rival. It was a friendship filled with pain and lessons, like a journey shared by two heroes. Together they faced countless adventures on the battlefield, fighting giants and uncovering the secrets of unknown lands. Through these journeys, Gilgamesh learned that true heroism is measured not just by strength but by the heart. However, dear friends, Gilgamesh's fate was a sorrowful one. After the death of his friend Enkidu, all that strength and determination suddenly wavered. Confronted with the harsh realities of mortality, his ambitions and dreams set him on a quest to seek the secret of immortality, to speak with the gods, and to transcend the limits of humanity. But this journey was not just an adventure, it was a spiritual quest, where he found himself and deeply felt the weight of being human. In the end, he understood that immortality wasn't about stone walls or the pursuit of eternal life, it was about the marks he left behind. Gilgamesh accepted his mortality and passed this message to the people of Uruk. The final journey of this great leader, the hero who defied the gods, became the oldest and greatest epic of facing one's own fate. This epic turned into a treasure that echoed throughout Mesopotamia. And so Gilgamesh's name and legend were etched not just in the stone walls of Europe, but in the very heart of all Mesopotamia. He was the son of the gods, but above all, he was a hero to his people. Though he couldn't achieve immortality, the legacy he left has lived on in the memories and spirits of his people for centuries. Even now we feel his echo in those distant, dusty streets. Ah, my friends, we're now traveling down the dusty paths of Mesopotamia to reach a towering figure in history, Sargon. Listen closely, for he was no ordinary man, he was a visionary leader, who rose from among his people to establish the first great empire in history. Sargon of Akkad. His story is one of power and courage, a tale of a man who achieved the impossible. It all began when he was born in an ordinary settlement. Legend has it that he was found in a basket floating on the river, just like the heroes in the myths. But Sargon's destiny wasn't to be just an ordinary man, he was meant to change the course of history. At that time, Mesopotamia was made up of independent city-states. Cities like Ur, Uruk, and Eridu worshipped their own gods and protected their own lands. They were powerful cities, but their conflicts and rivalries kept Mesopotamia from being united. And it was from this division and chaos that Sargon emerged. As a young man, it would have taken immense courage just to dream of conquering kingdoms. Yet he was confident and steadfast. This determination pushed him to dream of uniting all the Sumerian cities one day. He began his challenging journey by seizing control of the city of Kish, from where he spread his power throughout Mesopotamia. Sargon was not just a commander, he was also a clever strategist. In those times, military strength was essential for success, but Sargon acted not only with brute force but also with intelligence and strategy. His first move was to conquer each Sumerian city-state one by one. He fought bravely on the battlefield, strategically organized his army, and laid the foundations of a massive empire by merging the autonomy of the cities. With each city he conquered, he solidified unity and power across Mesopotamia. He built such strength that it became known as the Akkadian Empire, the first of its kind in history. Akkad was not just a piece of land, it was an empire where a vast people came together, grew, and thrived. The Akkadian Empire that Sargon established developed an unprecedented administrative structure. Managing such a vast territory at that time was no easy task. However, Sargon appointed regional governors, ensuring the central authority's power was felt across the empire. These governors both governed the people according to Sargon's laws and maintained order within the empire. This way, the extensive land spread across Mesopotamia could be managed from a single source. Additionally, Sargon placed great importance on trade. Akkad grew wealthy not just through military power but also by controlling trade routes. From north to south and east to west, Akkadian traders sold goods and spread their culture throughout Mesopotamia. My friends, at this point we realized that Sargon was not just a conqueror, he was also a founder, a visionary. Sargon's armies defended the borders, while the traders brought wealth by crossing those borders. He built the Akkadian Empire not only on the battlefields, but also created a civilization through trade, culture, and governance. That's why Sargon's name echoes in the lands of Mesopotamia, symbolizing not just strength but also intelligence and strategy. The Akkadian Empire became his legacy, marking the golden age of Mesopotamia. And so Sargon, the man who conquered and united this land, continued to live on in the memories of generations as a hero and a leader. Ah, my dear friends, now history takes us to the later days of the magnificent Akkadian Empire founded by Sargon. Once, the Akkadian Empire spread its power and influence across every corner of Mesopotamia. But unfortunately, it was beginning to succumb to the cruel twists of fate. While Sargon's descendants tried to follow in his footsteps and protect this vast empire, internal unrest and external threats began to gather over Akkad like dark clouds. For years, Akkad remained a solid empire at the heart of Mesopotamia, bringing stability and order to its surroundings. However, my friends, remember that the greatest enemy of great empires is not always external forces, but the unrest within. This massive structure, which was Sargon's legacy, had become increasingly difficult to manage. Corruption in governance, local governors looking out for their own interests, and public discontent were slowly weakening the empire from the inside. The people felt the pressure of governments that exploited Sargon's legacy rather than the justice he had brought. As if these internal issues weren't enough, there was a new threat rising from the east, the Gushans. The Gushans were a fierce and warrior-like people living in the mountainous regions east of Mesopotamia. For them, the fertile lands of Mesopotamia were a tantalizing treasure. The Akkadian Empire, struggling with its internal conflicts, had become unable to defend itself against the Gushan invasion. Its armies, once strong enough to protect Akkadian territory, had weakened over time and the people had lost their former excitement and unity. Then came the day when the Gushans began to flood into Mesopotamian lands. They surged forth like an unstoppable tide. One by one, the Akkadian cities fell, and the people surrendered in horror to these new invaders. When the Gushans completely seized Mesopotamia, a dark era began that overshadowed the glory of Akkad. They disregarded Akkadian culture and order, ruling Mesopotamia with their own harsh rules. For the Akkadian people, this marked the end of an era and the beginning of another difficult period. The Gushan dominance meant years of instability and fear for Mesopotamia. The fall of the Akkadian Empire left an indelible mark on Mesopotamia, serving as a lesson etched in the minds of the people. The grand structure built by Sargon had now faded into the dusty pages of history, yet the legacy and lessons it left behind would guide the leaders of the future. Ah, dear friends, this land of Mesopotamia has seen both great rises and devastating falls. After the collapse of the Akkadian Empire, a new hope, a new light rose from the ashes of a grand civilization, the rise of Ur. The harsh and merciless rule of the Gushans had worn the people down, and their quest for peace and justice had taken root deep within the land, like a seed yearning to grow. It was during this tumultuous time that there emerged a figure in the city of Ur, someone with the power to revitalize Mesopotamia and bring a new order and peace to his people, Ur-Nammu. Ur-Nammu, a wise ruler, rallied his people and rolled up his sleeves to establish a great empire. He laid the foundations for the third dynasty of Ur, the third great dynasty of the Sumerians. Ur-Nammu was not just a king, he was a leader who cared for his people's welfare, guided by the principles of justice. He worked tirelessly to spread the power and fairness of Ur throughout Mesopotamia. Gaining the trust of the people, Ur-Nammu built a strong governing structure, expanded irrigation systems, revitalized trade, and most importantly, made a revolutionary step in the field of law, the first written codes of the Sumerians. Friends, these laws of Ur-Nammu became symbols of justice and order, shining like a guiding beacon for the people of Mesopotamia. Based on the principle of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, these laws were structured to protect the rights of the people and ensure justice. Under these rules, everyone was equal, both rich and poor had to bow to the king's justice. These laws left an unforgettable impact on the people. A system where justice prevailed brought peace to the land. During this period, you would see the great cities of Mesopotamia revitalizing, with irrigation channels nourishing the land, turning it into a lush expanse of farmland. Trade routes were secured, and merchants came and went from all corners of Mesopotamia. The third dynasty of Ur made Mesopotamia a cultural hub. Temples rose, priests shared their knowledge, and art flourished once again. But alas, history flows relentlessly, and nothing lasts forever. Those who came after Ur-Nammu tried to protect the grand structure he had built, but they fell short against the harsh passage of time. The riches of Mesopotamia were tempting the powers around it, heralding new invasions. And one day the Elamites set their eyes on these fertile lands. This warrior nation from the east captured the cities of Ur and buried the third dynasty of Ur deep in the annals of history. Thus, the last great rise of the Sumerians came to a sorrowful end. But dear friends, every ending leaves behind valuable treasures. The laws of Ur-Nammu, as symbols of justice, would be spoken of for centuries and form the foundations of the order established in Mesopotamia. And the last epic rise of the Sumerians would be passed down as an unforgettable tale etched into the history of Mesopotamia. Ah, dear friends, in the cycle of history, amidst the rising and falling of civilizations, the powerful shadow of ancient Babylon now appears. When the Elamite invasion brought an end to the third rise of the Sumerians, the lands of Mesopotamia fell into a period of silence. But soon these fertile lands would bear the mark of a new leader. That leader was King Hammurabi, who rose to power at the gates of Babylon. Hammurabi was not just a ruler, he was the founder of a legal system that would be discussed for centuries in Mesopotamia. With Hammurabi's dominance over Babylon, the city transformed into not only a center of power but also the capital of justice and laws. His goal was to make Babylon the heart of Mesopotamia, a capital where trade routes converged and where art, science, and law reached new heights. But for that, he needed to establish a strong government and a solid order. Gaining the people's trust and ensuring security and prosperity were Hammurabi's top priorities. In this direction, he set out to prepare those famous laws, which would be remembered and passed down for centuries. Oh, my friends, the words carved into stone tablets by Hammurabi's laws would not only mark the era but also rank among the oldest legal codes in human history. King Hammurabi aimed to protect everyone's rights with these laws that encompassed every segment of society. These laws addressed the people's quest for justice in every area, from theft to commercial disputes, from marriage to irrigation, shaped by the principle of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. This system ensured that punishments were handed down fairly for crimes, allowing the people to trust one another. Hammurabi intended for every individual to be equal before these laws. The poor and the rich were the same in the eyes of the king's justice. Thanks to these laws, Babylon established such an order that traders and people coming from all corners of Mesopotamia grew to respect it more and more each day. Hammurabi strengthened Babylon's power, not just through justice but also with his armies. The expanding borders of Babylon came to dominate much of Mesopotamia, forcing other city-states to submit to Hammurabi's power. The lands throughout Mesopotamia had now recognized Babylon's justice and Hammurabi's laws. Under Hammurabi, Babylon was no longer just a strong city, it had become the undisputed leader of Mesopotamia. This empire hosted a golden age of civilization, enriched by fertile agricultural lands, bustling trade, and the trust among its people. However, behind all this splendor lay the limited time that history grants to every civilization. The relentless passage of time would, of course, test Babylon and Hammurabi's justice-filled empire. But, dear friends, remember this: Hammurabi's legacy would be passed down as an everlasting light, a brilliant star of Babylon that would never fade, always mentioned among the great civilizations of Mesopotamia. So, the rise of Babylon is such a tale. My friends, it's the legend of an empire where justice reigned, where power and knowledge merged, and where history was carved in stone. Ah, my dear friends, history reshapes itself with new waves whenever the era of powerful leaders comes to an end. After Hammurabi's death, the Babylonian Empire slowly began to lose the grandeur that had once been forged in justice and strengthened by laws. Hammurabi skillfully wielded the sword of justice, making Babylon the heart of Mesopotamia. But his successors didn't have the strength to uphold that powerful legacy. Once a glorious empire ruling over all of Mesopotamia, Babylon now struggled to maintain its former glory. The destructive waves of time had left Babylon at the mercy of new enemies and intrigues. Hammurabi's grandchildren weren't as resilient, my friends. Unrest among the people was on the rise, and the governing structure was beginning to weaken. This didn't go unnoticed by outside forces, of course. And so, the Hurrians, Kassites, and Assyrians who had their eyes set on the vast lands of Mesopotamia saw Babylon's weakness as an opportunity. Each of them was eager to establish their dominance over this fertile land. The Babylonian Empire was now witnessing the disintegration of the strong order it had once established, caught in the midst of political intrigues and power struggles. The Hurrians tried to take advantage of Babylon's weakened state by coming in from the north. The Kassites, arriving from the west, gained a deep foothold in Babylon's territory. They influenced Babylon not only militarily but also culturally. The Assyrians also became part of this complex equation. The Assyrian state, gaining strength in northern Mesopotamia, didn't hesitate to exploit Babylon's weakness for its own benefit. Thus, a period of complete political chaos began in Mesopotamia. On one side, the weakening Babylonian dynasties; on the other, new kingdoms eager to gain power. Mesopotamia was spiraling into a chaos where no single ruler could claim authority. Over time, Babylon was reshaped by the Hurrians and Kassites, while Assyrian influence continued to expand. This turmoil opened a new chapter in Mesopotamian history. These lands, once known for peace and justice, had become a geography where political balances constantly shifted and power changed hands. The decline of the Babylonian Empire created an ongoing uncertainty among the peoples of Mesopotamia, ushering in an era where every new leader tried to establish new orders, but could never hold on to them for long. Ah, my friends. So while Mesopotamia was tossed about in political chaos, it also became a battleground for the forces that would lay the new foundations of civilization. Babylon's fall would profoundly impact the future of Mesopotamia, leaving a legacy that the peoples of the region would not soon forget. What a great irony it is that this city, once the capital of justice and laws, was now being tossed around like a toy in the hands of rival kingdoms driven by the desire for power. Ah, my friends, let me take you on a journey to the legendary rise of one of history's oldest and most powerful empires, the Assyrian Empire. Know that this kingdom established the first great military force in the vast lands of Mesopotamia, carving the nuances of war and strategy into the pages of history. As the Assyrian territories expanded, they became a legend, something spoken of with both fear and admiration in the languages of the surrounding peoples. But the story of Assyria is not just about conquests or ruthless wars, it's also filled with military genius. An organized structure, and unique governing power. The Assyrians, as they laid the foundations of this mighty kingdom in the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, understood the vital importance of military power. They needed a military organization, a war strategy. Assyria was about to transform from a handful of tribes into a colossal force, shining brightly in Mesopotamia both militarily and politically. The warrior kings of Assyria trained their armies not just for defense, but also for expansion. But this was no ordinary army. My friends, the Assyrian army was organized, disciplined, and technically advanced. Every soldier's duty, the weapon they wielded, and their role in battle were meticulously planned down to the finest detail. In the front lines, archers rained arrows upon enemy lines, disrupting their formations, while heavy infantry carrying shields stood right behind them. Their armor was made from some of the strongest metals of the time, and their shields lined up like a wall, effectively halting the enemy's advance. This Assyrian wall not only brought despair to their foes, but also instilled a sense of victory in the Assyrian soldiers. Behind this formation, there were spear throwers and war chariots. These chariots were like giants of war. They crushed through enemy ranks, leaving a cloud of dust that signified defeat in their wake. Syria's expansion policy was rooted in this power. But they didn't achieve success solely through military force. The Assyrian kings also relied on their diplomatic savvy. They formed various alliances with neighboring kingdoms to protect trade routes and establish dominance. My friends, Assyria carefully observed the weaknesses of surrounding civilizations, making strategic moves at the right moments, thereby gradually extending their territories. These early Assyrian kingdoms were so effective at the heart of Mesopotamia that their names became legends whispered in fear throughout the languages. The Assyrians' ruthless yet disciplined and strategic structure not only made them the first great military power in Mesopotamia, but also left behind an everlasting legacy with their marks on history. Thus, the shadow of Assyria has been etched not just into the lands, but into the very fabric of history itself. Dear friends. My dear friends, let me take you on a journey to the legendary resurgence of Babylon, the shining star of Mesopotamia, during the mighty reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. At this time, Babylon became not just a military power, but also a center of culture, wealth, and wisdom. The world's eyes were captivated by this enchanting city. Once struggling under the shadow of the Assyrian Empire, Babylon began to take its first steps toward becoming a great empire under the powerful Nebuchadnezzar. He was not just a king, he was a clever and ambitious leader who wanted to spread Babylon's glory throughout Mesopotamia. He led the city's rebirth, transforming it into a magnificent place that would be known as the capital of the world. Yes, my friends, Babylon's star began to shine brightly under the mighty hand of Nebuchadnezzar. This great ruler rebuilt the walls of Babylon, making them taller and sturdier, creating massive structures that seemed to reach for the sky. The majestic lion-lined streets of Babylon, the vividly colored glazed walls, the Tower of Babylon dedicated to the god Marduk, and the legendary Hanging Gardens. So many people flocked to see these beauties, gazing in admiration at the gardens and the tower, as if they were looking up at the stars. Nebuchadnezzar didn't just make Babylon a center of art and aesthetics, he turned it into a gathering place for scholars, philosophers, and artists. During this time, Babylon became known as a treasure trove of knowledge that would leave a profound mark on human history in fields like architecture, astronomy, and literature. Nebuchadnezzar's glorious reign also expanded Babylon's borders, but it didn't stop at Mesopotamia. He made his mark in history by conquering the kingdom of Judah. When he entered Jerusalem, sacred items were brought back to Babylon and dedicated to the god Marduk. The people of Judah were exiled to Babylon. This event would come to be known as the Babylonian exile. While it was a painful period for the people of Judah, it marked the beginning of a time that would further enhance Babylon's power and splendor. This exile also changed Babylon's cultural landscape, transforming it into a melting pot of different cultures and beliefs. Babylon grew and developed so much through Nebuchadnezzar's actions that it earned the title of an empire rather than just a kingdom. All the peoples of Mesopotamia spoke of Babylon's wealth, Nebuchadnezzar's power, and the unique beauty of the city. Babylon was no longer just a city, it had become a center of culture, art, and wisdom that the world admired. Those who came to see this city would return home to share tales of Nebuchadnezzar's name and Babylon's beauty. That's why, my friends, Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon truly deserved to be recognized as not just the capital of Mesopotamia, but the capital of the world. His name remained forever inscribed on the walls, towers, gardens, and in the minds of the people of Babylon. The story of Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon will continue to be remembered as one of the most glorious periods in human history. My dear friends, now turn your eyes to the distant past. Witness the rise of the first empires in Mesopotamia and the profound legacy they left behind. These ancient lands were the cradle of civilization, and the first empires that ruled here laid the cultural, military, and economic foundations that would leave a mark on human history. This legacy was like a tree of life, with roots that ran deep, a trunk that gave strength to future civilizations, and branches that reached across centuries to our own time. Let's start with the Sumerians, my friends. The cuneiform script that rose on clay tablets was born from their hands for the first time. This writing became one of the sacred languages of Mesopotamia, serving many purposes, from recording the power and wealth of a kingdom to immortalizing the names of the gods. Cuneiform became the language of future civilizations. The Assyrians, Babylonians, and even Persians adopted this writing to tell their own stories. Over time, one of the world's first legal systems, the Code of Hammurabi, also emerged as a gift of this script. My friends, these laws laid the cornerstone for justice. They protected the weak, set limits on the powerful, and governed Mesopotamia with fairness. Following the Sumerians and Akkadians, the Babylonian Empire and the subsequent Assyrian Empire took Mesopotamia's military legacy to new heights. Their military organization, battle tactics, and discipline made these empires strong and nearly invincible. The Assyrians, in particular, became one of the most feared powers of the time with their advanced war machines and siege tactics. The city walls and massive fortresses they built spread throughout Mesopotamia, symbolizing not only defense but also power. This military legacy served as a guide for future civilizations, teaching how strength, courage, and strategy could sustain a people. And my dear friends, we mustn't forget Mesopotamia's religious legacy. The peoples of Mesopotamia worshipped the sky, the stars, and the forces of nature, believing that the gods governed the world. Gods like Marduk, Anu, Enlil, and Ishtar were revered throughout Mesopotamia, with massive temples built in their honor. Ziggurats rose high, sacrifices were made, and priests conveyed the will of the gods to the people. These religious beliefs traveled far beyond Mesopotamia. Traces of its faith can be found in the names of Greek gods, in Persian beliefs, and even in the names that the Romans gave their deities. The legacy of these first empires in Mesopotamia didn't stay confined to their own lands. Through trade routes, their scientific discoveries, knowledge of astronomy, architectural innovations, and cultural values spread from the Middle East to Egypt, the Mediterranean, and all the way to India. Every step taken on these lands allowed a civilization to bloom. Every building block shaped the future of humanity. So, my friends, the cultural, military, and religious treasures inherited from Mesopotamia's first empires are like the hidden hand that laid the foundations of the modern world. Yes, perhaps when viewed from today, these empires might seem like a distant, forgotten history. However, the legacy they left behind continues to resonate in our lives and even in our thoughts. Because they were the ones who took the first steps towards civilization, the first builders in human history. Ah, my dear friends, we've embarked on a journey through the ancient lands of history, uncovering the secrets hidden in the shadows of Mesopotamia. We've explored the powerful armies of Assyria, the magnificent towers of Babylon, the magical and mighty Queen of Egypt, the ambitious leaders of Rome, and the timeless legacies left by all the empires that once ruled these lands. Every detail, every story was filled with echoes that still resonate with us today, right? Empires rose, heroes fought, and kings and queens clung tightly to their thrones, but in the end, they all took their place on the stage of history, etched forever in humanity's collective memory. But remember, my friends, these stories haven't just remained on the dusty pages of the past. The lessons we can learn from them, and the secrets whispered to us by those times still shine a light on our present. The ambition of an emperor, the intelligence of a queen, the resilience of a nation, and the faith of a people. All of these remind us that history is not just about what happened, it reflects everything that has shaped our world today. We may not have stood in the bustling squares or on the battlefields of those times, but with the lessons we've learned from them, we can step into the future with more confidence. Now it's time to part ways with the knowledge we've gained on this journey. But don't forget, this history continues to live as long as it is being told. The stories and legends we've shared with you are precious for this very reason. On our next journey, we may trace the paths of different lands, different peoples, and different legends. We'll reach back to the dawn of time, venture into distant realms, and go beyond wars and peace. My dear friends, as we leave here, I leave you with a reminder: understanding the past means understanding the present, and understanding the present is what builds the future. Carry this knowledge, these stories, and the lessons history has taught us, and keep them in your mind and heart until we meet again. When we gather next time, we will dive into the mysteries of a completely different history. I'll be waiting for you right here, around the fire, in the depths of history.